If a fool falls down in the woods and there's no one there to see it, does he hurt his bottom? Ow! Yes, he does!
The Fool's Journey. It is a bright morning with the sun shining and the birds singing. From the distance walks a rather foolish-looking fellow, the sort of chap who's not really experienced anything significant before. As he wanders along with his dog, he whistles expertly to himself. And wonders what life will bring him along his travels. I wonder what life will bring me along my travels. His dog barks to warn him of the cliff that he's happily wandering toward, but the fool pays no attention. What could possibly go wrong?
What do you get if you throw 2 drums and a cymbal off a cliff? Ba-dum-tsh. Haha, still got it.
It would seem that the fool's journey has begun. To be continued.
Welcome to Kippy's Quest, a new channel where I'll be working my way through the study of ritual magic and the Western mystical tradition.
Hold on, there are other channels that do this. They know a lot more than you and they don't rely on cheap gimmicks.
But I've got something that they haven't.
And what could that possibly be?
Floundering incompetence and an abject lack of knowledge.
Oh good, just what the occult lacked.
My thinking is that if you're just starting out, we can learn together, and if you're an expert, you can put me straight when I get things wrong, which will probably be all the time. This is my modest occult library.
And how many of those books have you read?
Some of them. There's a lot to take in.
So what you're saying is that we get to watch a rank amateur muddle his way through a spiritual journey like a drunken buffoon?
Essentially, yes. You could say that I'm a lot like the Fool card.
No argument there.
And that's exactly where we're going to begin, with the tarot.
I always thought that was all about fortune telling and finding out who you're going to marry.
That's what they want you to think.
Donald Michael Craig writes in Modern Magic that becoming proficient in a divination system is necessary to prevent grey magic from becoming black magic. That is why this study is very important. So if we are to become a powerful magician, we need to get a good handle on some form of divination.
But why the tarot? Why not staring at tea leaves or gazing into a crystal ball?
Because the tarot forms an essential part of ritual magic.
If only there was some kind of quick primer to give us a rough outline.
A brief history of the tarot.
The tarot is a series of 78 cards split into 2 parts called the Major Arcana and Minor Arcana. This comes from the Latin word for secret. Therefore, the tarot is divided into big secrets and small secrets. The Minor Arcana is split further into 4 suits: wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. Despite many myths and legends, the earliest we can say for sure about when the tarot first appeared was 15th century Italy and the Visconti Sforza deck. Originally used as a hugely complicated gambling game called tarocchini. Fast forward to Paris in the 17th century and we find the Tarot de Marseille, along with 2 gentlemen, Anton Comte de Gebalan and Jean-Baptiste Alliette, who are widely recognized as the first people to popularize the tarot as a means of divination. Fast forward again to London in the year 1909 and we find the most popular and recognizable deck of all, the Riether-Waite Tarot.
Now we're going to be touching on several different tarot decks, but we'll be mainly focusing on the Riether-Waite, as this is the most popular. If we were to study all of them, we'd be here forever. But if you prefer a different deck, fear not. Most of what we'll be talking about applies to all standard decks.
What do you mean by standard decks?
Well, a standard deck contains 78 cards comprising 22 major arcana and 56 minor arcana, split into 4 suits. Other decks include oracle cards, some of which are fantastic, but this doesn't really apply to those as they tend to have their own rules. So the Riether-Waite Tarot gets its name from the deck's publisher, the Riether Company, and the creator of the cards, Arthur Edward Waite. Now many people have remarked that it should be known as the Riether-Waite Smith deck, referring to Pamela Coleman Smith who actually painted the cards, but that's another story for another video. So the first card in the tarot, numbered at 0, is the Fool.
Hello, did you know that some experts have called me the only true tarot card?
Lon Milo Duquette writes in the CHCKEN QABALAH, the Fool is the only real tarot card. In essence, all other cards live inside the Fool.
See? Told ya.
Many people at first considered the Fool to represent a cretin, moron, or dullard.
Dickhead!
However, the archetype of the Fool goes much deeper than this. In the pictorial key to the tarot, Waite says that the Fool card is associated with folly, mania, extravagance, intoxication, delirium, and frenzy. Now, he's barely scratching the surface there, and the key to the tarot can be somewhat obscure. The simple interpretations given in the latter part of the book have come from historical accounts, and don't necessarily reflect how Waite intended the cards to be used. You can see it right there on the front cover where it says, being fragments of a secret tradition, under the veil of divination. This leaves novices like me the task of picking through to find out what he really meant, and that's what this part of the channel is all about.
Can we get back to the main subject, please? I.e. me?
If we go way back to the 15th century and the Visconti Sforza tarot, in that deck the Fool was depicted as a rather scruffy looking fellow, wearing tattered clothes, basically a beggar.
Got 10 pence for a cup of tea.
However, by the time we get to the Rider-Waite card, we can see him as a bit more fashionable, in a rather dandy-looking floral tunic. He's certainly hip to the jive, Daddy-O, and ready for the discotheque. Waite describes his Fool as a prince of the other world on his travels through this one, all amidst the morning glory in the keen air. Over his right shoulder is a large wand with a bundle of possessions attached. This is said to symbolize untapped collective knowledge. The idea is that the Fool carries the collective unconscious of humanity and very little else as he's so inexperienced. In his left hand he carries a white rose, a symbol of purity and innocence. At his feet we see a small dog who is clearly trying to warn the Fool of his impending fall. On our hero's face there's an expression of carefree abandon, blissfully unaware of the drop looming ahead. Now this is the crux of the card. It's all about beginnings and starting something new. When we take it upon ourselves to begin a new endeavour, we've got no idea what's coming next. That's what the cliff represents. The Fool is a symbol of our journey into the unknown, and the optimism we feel when we're just starting out. That's why the card is often interpreted as a sign to take a chance, push through our fears and seek out our heart's desire. Waite says he surveys the blue distance before him, its expanse of sky rather than the prospect below. He's focused on what could be without worrying too much about what could go wrong. This could apply to a literal journey, a career change, or a new relationship. However, in its purest aspect, I believe the card is telling us that we should throw caution to the wind and follow our dreams. According to Waite, the edge which opens on the depth has no terror. It is as if the angels were waiting to uphold him if it came about that he leapt from the height. His countenance is full of intelligence and expectant dream. He goes on to describe the Fool as the spirit in search of experience. It's all about taking that first step and having the faith that whatever happens along the way, it's always the right thing to do.
Correspondence Corner!
Each of the tarot cards has a set of correspondences that we'll be including in this section. These mostly relate to astrology, planets, herbs, and the Kabbalistic tree of life. We're not going into too much detail just yet, but I wanted to include them here for reference, so here goes.
The Fool sits on the 11th path of the tree of life between Keter and Chokmah. It corresponds to the Hebrew letter Aleph, which means ox. The musical note is E natural. The corresponding herb is ginseng. The element is air, and the astrological symbol is Uranus.
Ooh, there's a surprise.
Now we need to talk a bit about reversals.
What's going on?
You may be aware that sometimes a card can have a slightly different meaning if it appears upside down. In Rachel Pollack's wonderful book 78 Degrees of Wisdom, she describes reversed cards as a sign of blocked energy and a resistance to what the card means. For example, if we're to accept that the Fool is telling us to start out on a new adventure, then a reversed Fool could mean that we're avoiding doing that in some way, holding ourselves back perhaps. Now I don't want to overcomplicate things here as the cards can seem convoluted enough at first, but I'll be taking a much deeper look at reversals later on, so if that sounds like it's right up your ley line, make sure to stay tuned. The Fool is numbered at 0. This figure is thought to represent unlimited potential, a blank slate of an as yet unwritten story.
It also represents the number of brain cells in both of your heads.
0 is of course the number before numbers, representing both emptiness and infinity. This brings us to our next subject, the Fool's journey. A very intuitive way of learning the cards of the major arcana is to imagine the Fool travelling through each of them on his quest to achieve transcendence, so we'll be following his journey at the start of each video.
Can't wait.
Sometimes the Fool is thought to be a symbol of naivety, but this only reinforces the sense of innocence and faith that we can see so clearly in this, the first card of the tarot deck. Of course, in reality, we're all fools because we're all heading into the unknown all the time. We can't predict everything that's going to happen. An asteroid could fall out of the sky right now and I could be completely obliterated.
See you next week. Thank you for joining us on Kippy's quest. May the coming days bring you joy, adventure, new beginnings, and the desire to like this video and subscribe to our channel. What kind of a name's Kippy anyway? Sounds like a drain cleaner.